In an unusual move of retribution against Israel, the State Department announced on Tuesday its intention to enforce travel bans on extremist Jewish settlers accused of carrying out a series of recent attacks against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Secretary of State Antony Blinken revealed the decision after having previously cautioned Israel about forthcoming actions in response to the attacks. While individual visa bans were not explicitly disclosed, Department spokesperson Matthew Miller indicated that the bans would take effect starting Tuesday, encompassing dozens of settlers and their families. Additional bans were suggested if instances of settler violence persisted, although specific numbers and identities of those affected were withheld for confidentiality reasons. This development arises during a delicate phase in U.S.-Israeli relations. Despite mounting international criticism, the Biden administration has consistently supported Israel since it was targeted by Hamas on October 7. The Israeli embassy in Washington opted not to comment on the situation. In recent weeks, the administration has escalated calls for Israel to take more substantial measures to minimize civilian casualties as they extend their offensive and focus on densely populated areas in southern Gaza. While refraining from outright criticism of the offensive, the U.S. has become increasingly vocal about settler violence in the West Bank and Israel's perceived failure to respond to U.S. appeals to curb such incidents. Secretary Blinken emphasized the need for the Israeli government to hold extremist settlers accountable for violent attacks against Palestinians in the West Bank, stating that such attacks are deemed unacceptable by President Biden. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported on Monday that at least 8 Palestinians in the West Bank have been killed by settlers since October 7. The agency recorded 314 attacks resulting in Palestinian casualties, damage to Palestinian-owned property, or both. Approximately one-third of the attacks involved threats with firearms, while in nearly half of them, settlers were accompanied or actively supported by Israeli forces. Blinken announced a new visa restriction policy by the State Department targeting individuals believed to have undermined peace, security, or stability in the West Bank through acts of violence or actions restricting civilians' access to essential services and basic necessities. The U.S. will persist in seeking accountability for settler violence against Palestinians and Palestinian attacks against Israelis in the West Bank and Israel, particularly amidst heightened tensions due to the conflict in Gaza. Secretary Blinken stressed the shared responsibility of both Israel and the Palestinian Authority to maintain stability in the West Bank. Instability in the region, he emphasized, poses harm to both Israeli and Palestinian populations and threatens Israel's national security interests. This move follows Israel's recent entry into the U.S. visa waiver program, granting its citizens visa-free access to the U.S. However, those subject to the new policy will be ineligible for the program, and individuals holding current U.S. visas will face revocation.